The race is on! And with Fernando Alonso sending out mixed messages about his F1 future, we ask how long the 44-year-old can realistically go on, as well as asking what might be next for Christian Horner when he becomes available in F1 in mid-2026. I'm Edd Straw, and with me to chat all things F1 are Glenn Freeman and Ben Anderson. Glenn, I'll come to you first. Let's start off with a quote from Fernando Alonso, who has said of 2026, "If we are competitive, there is more chance that I stop. If we are not competitive, it will be very hard to give up without trying again." So what does that tell you about Fernando Alonso's plans?
I think it tells us that he hasn't made his mind up. And I suspect when you try and look underneath what he's said there, I think it's a legacy of everything he's been through during his F1 career. And I think it maybe tells us why he's stayed on this long. If his logic is, I'll stay on if I'm in a bad car, it's like, well, no wonder you're still here because you've had to drive a lot of bad cars in your time. But I think it just confirms the fact that his career is ridiculously long and he's almost waiting for exactly the right moment now to call time. And I do wonder from listening to that quote, I wonder if there's part of him that thinks actually maybe 2023 was the right time. Enjoy those podiums. That was actually, you could have gone out on an almost high. But I guess at that point he thought, well, this is the first step up. Things are only going to get better from here. So maybe he's saying there, actually, if 2026 is good, that might be as good as it's going to get. And then I step aside.
Ben, it feels to me like the fantasy for Fernando Alonso is a title win and retire, isn't it? Get that third victory. I guess that's the thing he's imagining in his wildest dreams, but probably would accept a little bit less than that as well.
I think he's stuck. So when he's saying, it will be, because it sounds counterintuitive, right? To say, if we're competitive, it's more likely I stop. And if we're uncompetitive, I'm going to soldier on because I really need to when I'm that old and I've been in F1 for that long and whatnot. Because he even said subsequently, well, I don't need to be here. I don't need to race. My job here is to make Aston Martin world champions. So I think what's really going on is part of his role is to help Lance Stroll become a better driver, become the world champion Lawrence Stroll thinks he can be, develop the team. Once the car gets competitive enough to win, everyone else is going to want a piece of that car. And I think he probably knows that his only chance of hanging on is if somehow that car isn't attractive enough in 2026 to attract someone who might come on the market like Max Verstappen. In which case, you stick with Alonso because he's still among the 10 best on the grid, certainly among the best 12 or 15. But if you've got a queue of 3 or 4 of the best drivers on the grid now wanting a piece of that action, then Alonso isn't necessarily the guy you nailed on go for into 2027.
One thing we can be sure of is if Aston Martin are competitive next year, there's going to be quite a long queue of drivers trying to get there, aren't there, Glenn? I guess the thing with Alonso is, what is he capable of in a front-running car? He's 44 now, he turns 45 next year. He's still operating at a high level, no question. But just the way things work means at 45, as he will be, are you going to be just starting to lose some of that edge?
That's the thing, we don't know. So when the car was good, the last time the car was good, or any time that there's a result to be had, he's quite capable of delivering it. But, I mean, you mentioned Lance Stroll there. That's part of the reason we don't know exactly how good Alonso is. It's not like what's going on. The comparison I'd make is Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari, who's gone in alongside Charles Leclerc, who is in that, I think, that list of couple or 2 or 3 drivers right at the front that you mentioned, Ben. Lewis going in there and being slightly slower than Leclerc, we're all going, well, we kind of expected that. Like, Leclerc's one of the absolute fastest on the grid. If Lewis had a teammate who didn't have that higher ceiling, we'd probably be going, well, that Ferrari's not very good. And, Lewis...
We're already saying that. It's even worse.
Yeah, true. We'd be going, Lewis seems to be doing quite a good job into his 40s. So it's really difficult to judge how far away from Alonso's peak he is right now because of the benchmark on the other side of the garage.
Obviously, Ben, Fernando Alonso is someone who says a lot of things, isn't he?
He could say that.
He means some of them.
Exactly. Some of the things are insightful and meaningful. Some of the things he just says because he can and he's Fernando Alonso. So I guess the big question is, are we making a mistake to try and read anything into this?
Yeah, I think that's what I was kind of hinting at earlier, that he's kind of using a kernel of truth to disguise the fact that, well, actually, my days are numbered, just because the direction this team is going in is going to intersect with a point where there are going to be other younger, more capable drivers on the market that the team will probably want to go for. And if they're ruthless enough to go for the World Championship, they won't just stick with Alonso because he helped them get to some of the better times on the journey. The point about where he stacks up, I think that's really interesting because, yes, Lewis is a great comparison, but Lewis is also a driver who, he's kind of adopted more of the technicalities and worked on himself and the team over the years, but he's always been a guy who relies on his talent. And there are certain batches of drivers through history. Kimi Räikkönen was in this category, Michael Schumacher. They're able to have decent careers past 40 just because of how good they were, and I think how little it took out of them at their peak. Alonso must enter that sphere at some point, but he's always been a driver who's a bit more canny, more technical. People who work with him, like Andrea Stella, now obviously team principal at McLaren, says he's as clever as some of the best engineering minds in F1. That carries you a long way in a sport as technical as Formula One. And he's always been more of the kind of dogged racer, rather than pure out-and-out pace, pole position type driver that Lewis Hamilton has been at his peak. So I think there are factors just in Alonso's natural makeup in his favour in terms of longevity. But I think it's unlikely that at his age, he's going to be able to operate even in a really good car as well as some of those other top drivers on the grid now.
Yeah, that's the big question, because age does have an effect eventually. You can just never be sure exactly how and when. For some, it might be that they can go on well into their 40s without any tangible degradation, but others might hit that mark in their 30s, etc. It's a
and you're going to have to work. You're definitely going to have to work. Like you see it in football. Even if you play football at a lower level, five-a-side, and you play a team of youngsters like 20-something kids, and you're in your 40s, in your mind, you're as quick and reactive and as skilled as you've ever been. But if you watch one of your teammates do a move, beat a man with the ball, and then watch how that younger player recovers to intercept the ball before your teammate's done their next action, suddenly you realise, oh man, we're slow. But when you're in that moment on the pitch, you have no idea that your whole way of moving has slowed down by 5-10% compared to when you were in your 20s, the same age as that kid. That will catch everyone out at some point. Doesn't matter how good an athlete you are. And in the meantime, you have to work doubly, triply as hard as those younger guys just to stay in the game. And that's where Alonso's living at the moment, and Lewis to some extent.
What I love about that quote is that it is deliberately vague, and it gives Alonso an out in any direction that he chooses during or at the end of 2026. You can interpret it so many ways. You could say, I interpret that to mean, he just wants one more race win, and if the car's good enough to give him that, he'll go, look, a championship is probably beyond me unless we've got a 2-second advantage next season. But if I can just win one more race and break that dry spell that I've had for that, then I can ride off and hold my head high. You can also interpret it, and I think we've kind of explored this a bit already, that if the team looks ready for that megastar to come in, if Max Verstappen is trying to get into that car in 27, Alonso's kind of given himself the chance to go, I'm going to do the right thing here and step aside, and I will take some kind of reflected glory with whatever Max does in that car next. But having followed the entirety of Alonso's career in one way or another, that just the thing about, if we're not competitive, I'll probably stay on. That almost
glutton for punishment.
Yeah, it almost breaks my heart a little bit that he can't bring himself to leave on a low note. That's what I think.
Yeah, well, the thing that he wants really deep down is that third world championship, and he's not won a race since 2013.
Absolutely crazy.
Which is absolutely extraordinary, because
he could have won that Monaco race, couldn't he? He must feel like that. In the Aston, yeah. Was it 23?
Yeah, that was possible.
There was a window and they didn't take it. I feel like that's the one chance he's had legitimately since.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it will be very, very interesting if, let's say, the Aston Martin Honda package is strong next year. Let's say it could fight for the championship. That'll be a great measure, Alonso, because I know what Alonso will be thinking to himself. He'll think, well, if it can, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to dig deep. That's maybe one of the things that is in his mind about that. That'll probably be my last season, because he knows he'll have to put everything into that. kind of a Rosberg 16 type scenario.
Agree,
Where,
yeah.
And he won't be able to go again.
Exactly, yeah. So
if it's good enough, he has to do it because he has to do it before everyone else twigs that they're good enough to do it, I think.
Exactly. And Alonso will never let any hint of ageing. I mean, he scoffs at questions about age, etc.
It doesn't look like he's aging. He's in incredible shape.
Oh, he is, yeah.
It's not aging in the face. I mean, I look older than him.
That's no bar, though. But it would be really interesting to know what's actually going on in his head, because these are all human beings. They present what they present externally, but there will probably be moments where he's wondering, am I quite as good as I once was? Am I not quite as strong in this area? Am I losing a bit here? Is my eyesight not quite what it was? All these things. And I imagine...
Well, he always says that they do the tests, don't they? He always says towards the end of the season when it comes up, I've had all the tests and I'm as good as ever and blah, blah, blah. I feel like he's still putting the work in. Like he's made sure that Formula 1 is still his ultimate focus, that there are no distractions. He hasn't tried to settle down and have a family.
Everything
all
else in his life is on hold.
Yeah. Yes.
And that is a key sign of your dedication, is when you're going, not doing family, I'm not doing kids, I'm not doing any of that. This is still my primary purpose in life. I believe that.
He's not even really doing much of the Lewis stuff, the kind of high-profile distraction stuff that you might say. Lewis has become preoccupied in the latter part of his career. Alonso seems kind of quite still singularly dedicated to motorsport, not just F1. I feel like he kind of just lives and breathes motorsport all the time. So, I don't see his kind of like dedication dropping. But I mean, Alpine, one of the reasons they kind of schismed with Alonso is they started to doubt from a scientific point of view how long he could remain at the peak of his powers. And even if he is extraordinary, I think we'd all agree he is an extraordinary athlete and driver, time waits for no man, does it?
Ben, let's talk now about Christian Horner, the former Red Bull team principal.
Him,
exactly. He's still around. He will be free to return to Formula 1 at some point next year, along with his massive payoff. Now, can you see that happening? Does he have to return to Formula 1? Will he? Should he? Do you think there'll be a point where Horner is the team principal again, causing trouble for Drive to Survive?
So many questions to answer there in one question. Should he? I mean, he doesn't have to. I think he's achieved so much. He's got a massive payout from his separation with Red Bull. So financially, I don't think he needs the work. I think he might want to, just because of how important F1 has been to his life, how competitive he is. It's that kind of ultimate environment to be in. And I think once you're out, as even people like Alonso, who we were just talking about, have found, like, you miss it. So
also, he didn't leave on his terms.
No, forced out. That will hurt deep down. If he does come back, I think the only way I can see him coming back is on different terms. You know, he fell victim to a corporate culture above him, as in, I'm not saying his behaviour was fine all the time or anything like that. I'm just saying that he wasn't in control of his own destiny. He was an employee, and as soon as the management decided they didn't want him at the helm anymore, they levered him out. Whereas if he had skin in the game and was like a partial owner or team owner, then it's kind of a step up, isn't it? It's the kind of thing that Newey's done by getting into bed with Lawrence Stroll, becoming a shareholder in the team, a managing partner, whatever they call it. Toto Wolff did it by taking a third stake in the Mercedes team. So then it's yours, and you have more than the control that Horner thrives with, and that he lost when the Red Bull management changed after Dietrich Mateschitz's death. And that kind of leaves him only two options, as I see it. There's the Alpine thing that's been rumoured with his mate Flavio Briatore and Bernie Ecclestone, if they manage to convince Renault to sell up, which seems like it's possible. I mean, you've said, Ed, many times that since Flavio walked through that door, theoretically all they're doing is lining up that team to sell. So why not to Horner? He's got a bit more money to spend on it now. Or it's a team like Haas, where Gene Haas is getting on, has not been particularly well. Maybe at some point he's going to want to pass that team on. And then again, it's a small operation. I suppose from a kind of purely sporting perspective, the idea of building up a very small crack team like Haas into a kind of bigger thing, a juggernaut that could take on the giants of F1, that might be appealing, even though it's a big journey. I feel like the competitive element of Horner, he'll want to chase championships if he can. Toto Wolff has got more Constructors' Championships than Horner managed to win with Red Bull, and that will rankle with him. I think he feels like the rug's been pulled from under him before he's been able to win everything he felt he could win in Formula One.
I think it's really important to underline that point you made about having skin in the game, as it were. It's not just about having some semblance of control. It's just about the, for want of a better word, the ego, if you like, of wanting to not just be someone working for a team, but having a part ownership in it. That's kind of the next step. And obviously, no matter how good his payoff is, and it's a very good payoff, no question. Everybody will have seen the numbers, pushing $100 million. It's understood to be getting into that sort of region. He hasn't got enough to buy a Formula One team, so he needs a big backer to come in, and he'll say, look, I'm the guy that put Red Bull at the front in Formula One, so make me a partner in this, give me a stake, Toto Wolff 33% or something, or a quarter or something like that, to show that I'm absolutely integral for this, and he'll probably want ideally even more. And indeed, he's always had in the background ideas for people to partner with just in case Red Bull vanished and pulled out. There have been various partners. There's always just been little continuation plans just in case, as everybody should have in that sort of position, just in case. What do you think, Glenn?
Well, given the two options Ben's outlined, I guess if he comes back and he's a lot more senior in those operations, then he can't come back just as team principal. I mean, by the end, he was team principal and CEO at Red Bull. He's got to come in higher than that. He's got to at least be a bigger fish in the smaller pond, but I still don't really know if that's worth it. Like, Haas seems totally pointless to me, unless you're going to come in and be the guy that...
You mean as a team or just for...
Sorry, just for Christian Horner. Unless you're going to come in and you're going to grow that back into Toyota F1 Mark II. If that relationship that's there is going to grow into something massive, he could definitely be the sort of person who would front that and make sure it isn't a repeat of Toyota Mark I. But otherwise, I don't see why you'd go there. And Alpine, again, if that's only ever going to be a customer team now, he's just spent all this time at Red Bull bemoaning the fact that they were at the mercy of other manufacturers, and he built up Red Bull powertrains to get out of that. Would you really want to go to Alpine, even if you can turn it into something better? The thing that caught my eye was a suggestion in one of the newspapers that Bernie Ecclestone has told him to go and basically be the Bernie Ecclestone of MotoGP, go and run MotoGP under or for Liberty Media. I think that's a great idea. A different environment, and be the absolute top dog in that world. I've always thought that I could have seen him wanting to do that in F1. So now you've got the Liberty connection. Go over there and see what you can do in MotoGP. Completely different challenge. What you do there will never be compared to what you're doing, what you've done at Red Bull. Whereas if he goes back in and running an F1 team again, everyone's going to be comparing all the time and going, right, well, by this point, he'd won races with Red Bull and all of that. Whereas go and do something different and something that's huge and something that matters. And I think that would really cater to what I assume is a thirst to get back in and do something that feels really significant.
And of course, there were times when people said that he could be the new Bernie Ecclestone in Formula One. That was talked about. I guess the one thing that I don't know MotoGP very well, so my one concern would be, and this is perhaps partly inspired by a recent column that Simon Patterson, our MotoGP correspondent, wrote about how Liberty Media shouldn't just treat MotoGP like F1 and do all the same things. Would a Christian Horner type figure risk doing that? And it would all be about F1ifying MotoGP, which might appeal to Liberty, but might leave some of the things that make MotoGP and make bike racing behind.
I think he would be smart enough to not do that, because I think he wouldn't want to go in and copy the F1 blueprint that's been done, because then he'd just look like someone that's enacting a plan that already existed. So I reckon he would go in and go, no, I must get an understanding of this completely different culture. I must prevent or avoid that F1ification that's been talked of, because that won't go down well in that paddock and in that community and with that fan base. I believe that he would go in and go, I'm going to do this my way, but I've got to work out what my way is first. And it isn't just to copy what we've seen in F1, because then he'd just be the guy who copied what F1 did before. And you talked about his ego earlier. Lots of people in high-profile places who are very successful have egos. It's part of what helps them get there in the first place. I don't think that ego would let him just copy what's been done elsewhere.
I'm not sure the fit is right. If you look at F1 now, the F1ification of F1 under Liberty Media, you've got Stefano Domenicali, who's respected former team principal of Ferrari, knows everybody. He's managed to kind of bring everybody on side, I think, with a kind of conciliatory approach, but also one that understands all the people he's working with. Whereas Horner going into a bike racing category where he doesn't know all the players in the same way, even if it's not copy and pasting the Liberty template, he develops his own one. He's got to get all those people to buy into his way of thinking. I'm not sure the bike racing community would see this outsider who's been successful in F1 as somebody that they should buy into. He might have
They're very
job in his
excited
hand.
about Gunter Steiner turning up, though, obviously in a team ownership capacity, but they've been pretty welcoming of him.
Well, that's good. But I suppose it
is different. He's
different.
Not telling them what to do.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. I just wonder if it's more work than it's worth for Christian, and going back into Formula One seems like more of a natural fit, but he's got time to wait, hasn't he? As you say, it's not till middle of next year that he can even return to the paddock under the terms of his separation with Red Bull as we understand it. So then he's got to kind of survey the lie of the land and figure out what he wants to do. But the fact that before he was ejected from Red Bull, he was building up, as you say, an in-house works engine program, feels like there's unfinished business for him in F1. Like it didn't look to me like
he didn't get to see that through.
No, he didn't get to see it through. He wasn't in the process of checking out. He wasn't succession building. He was succession building in the sense of how I'm going to take Red Bull to the next level. So I think if he could find an opportunity in F1 where he can do something similar, i.e. build a team up into something that could be much greater than the sum of its parts now, I think that would be more attractive to him than potentially a complete switch to a completely different category.
And of course, it is a strange scenario for anyone in this situation when you've done something in one specific area, quite a narrow area. There's only 11 next year F1 teams. So if you're going to do that again, there's not many places to do it, and it's the same arena, isn't it? So it's almost trying to repeat the same incredible trick. And given you did it so well the first time round, it's going to be quite hard to do it as well the second time, and it's just climbing that same mountain. So it'd be interesting whether there's some tangential challenge that appeals. Maybe MotoGP could do that. But what is going to be clear is anytime there's any talk about team principal, team boss, whoever's running the team, and that's what Horner would do. He would go in and it would be his team. He would run it no matter who owned it.
He's a big player in team boss silly season.
Exactly. He's going to be linked to everything. So if Ferrari start next season badly.
Anyone who starts next year badly, the way F1 team boss culture is now, it's become like football managers, hasn't it? The moment you're underperforming, your job is in jeopardy.
Exactly, yeah. And that's always going to appeal to those making the decisions as well, to go for somebody who's proven and got all of the history and the look. If you can say I did 20 years at Red Bull, built it up from a laughing stock team that was Jaguar to a powerhouse, then that carries a lot of weight, because any of those struggling teams will think, oh, we can do that as well. And regardless of any of the other question marks over Horner, the way he does things, the character, the controversies, etc., that will always be the thing that people are drawn to, the historic success. So I guess, Ben, if you're in Horner's position, you can afford to sort of sit back. I mean, he's the kind of person who will be working behind the scenes to see what's
sure.
there. I'm sure he's evaluated things, he's speaking to people, etc. But he can also afford to just hang back a little bit, just see how things play out. I don't think he'll take the first vaguely plausible offer that comes his way. Let's put it that way. It will not only need to tick boxes, but it'll also need to be something he thinks, actually, there's something to work with there.
Yeah, a guy with his track record, he can afford to play the waiting game. He'll have a lot of power. We like to talk about drivers having power in the driver market in terms of their options, and he would be one of the biggest players in an equivalent market for the team bosses. And also just that ego point that I think you made earlier, Ed. He might look at someone like Adrian Newey, who he partnered with for so long at Red Bull, how he's mapped success from different teams by being one of the best at what he does, if not the best of all time at what he does. Horner's ego might say to him, I'm that as a team principal or a team CEO, so why not build a new Red Bull somewhere else? I can do it. If anyone can do it, I can do it. And he would back himself. So I do think he will look at next year with deep interest and just think, well, I mean, Mercedes probably not. He's probably not looking at Mercedes and thinking, if they, because Toto Wolff has talked about maybe trying to get out at certain points, get off the hamster wheel, as he calls it. I can't see him doing that
Perfect
team.
replacement.
It
So
seems
history, that just seems like the one option that I just don't think it would fit. Even if you removed Wolff and it was like for like, just the whole animosity of that battle between the two teams, like that would have filtered down through the culture, I think. And I can't see him going there.
And there's also different cultures in teams that pre-exist. And actually, you could say there's no one-size-fits-all team principle. You could have, say, someone who's going to run a team could be perfect for 2 or 3 teams and actually terrible for another few other teams.
Yes.
Just not because they're any different, but just because of what they're working with and building from. Because if you go into any organisation, you don't just build it up from nothing. You take the good bits that exist and you work with that as well.
Well, Christian Horner has said this in the past. On Bring Back V10s a few years ago, we did a whole episode devoted to Red Bull's first season in F1 in 2005. And I went through loads of interviews that he'd given more recently about what it was like coming into F1 so young. He was in his, early 30s when he came in. And he said that one of the first things he learned back then when he came in, sitting around a table with Ron Dennis, Frank Williams, Jean Todt, Flavio Briatore, quickly he learned there is no one way to do this job. You can do it your own way. You don't need to copy anyone else. There's not a particular method of working that is how you succeed in Formula One. And that's what you've just outlined there, Ed. That's still the case now. But I think I've cracked exactly what's going to happen here. He's going to go into Alpine and he's going to say, what this team needs is its own engine.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah.
Bingo.
And that comes right back to all my complaints about them ditching their power unit program. And that's the big question. He would want to see in any organisation like that there's a direction to go in. Is he going to want to run Renault-owned Alpine while Renault's still there?
No, it'd have to be for new owners, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
All those names you mentioned, those storied, famous names of Formula One team principals, what they had in common was they were team owners, a lot of them.
Yeah.
The people that he joined Formula One table and sat with were all people who had skin in the game. So I think that sticks in the back of his mind. Like that's where you want to be ultimately. And I think he felt originally with Red Bull, Mateschitz was so hands off. He was de facto that. He just didn't have the money himself. It came from Mateschitz. But as soon as Mateschitz was out the way and the power vacuum developed in Austria, that's changed the game. And suddenly he's realised how vulnerable he was in that position. So to go back, he would need, I'm sure personally, to be in a different position to that, whatever the opportunity is.
Yeah, and make no mistake, we've got to be very clear on this. That was the reason Horner was removed. They removed it. It was a power thing. It was a power and politics thing and a control thing. And it was something that you could see looming on the horizon as soon as Dietrich Mateschitz was lost in, 2022. You could see that was one possible way things could go, and that's how it played out. So, yeah, it's a really difficult question to answer because it's very easy to say with certainty that, he's definitely going to return because it just seems so obvious because he's young enough to do it all again. People are going to want him. But it is all going to come down to opportunity, isn't it? What actually is the golden opportunity? Because even if he gets a golden opportunity, it's going to be really hard because, as you alluded to, Glenn, it's going to be compared to everything he's done in the past. And the bar's been set so high. It's very, very... it's implausible to take a team at that level and turn it around as quickly as Red Bull did last time. So he's going to have to be really careful to make sure that all those ducks are in a row and everything's lined up, isn't he? Otherwise, it could just be that scenario where he's endlessly linked to projects and speaks to countless people and just nothing ever comes together.
Well, maybe he just becomes a Flavio-style consultant. He just uses all of his great experience, gets paid a buttload of money just to swan in for a little bit and point out where you could go wrong here or do this commercial project for something.
That could even be the first step. Like if there's nothing that is exactly what he wants or doesn't give him all the extra bits around it that he wants, he may kind of, come in as an expensive troubleshooter somewhere, because then he's got that thing of, all right, I'm here, I'm keeping myself relevant, I'm showing that I'm still keen to do this, but I haven't completely attached myself to what might be a struggling project, and that's why they've needed me.
But he's also a racer, isn't he? Say what you like about Christian Horner, he is a racer at heart. He started as a driver, literally a racer, and then switched his attention to running teams, having initially done that as a way to...
So he's going to appear at Le Mans as one of the drivers, bronze driver.
I think he's definitely put that behind him. But obviously, he made the transition because that was initially the way for him to do F3000 as a driver to run something, and then he's moved into that. But he is a competitor, and I know when you're doing deals and the sort of business side of it, that's kind of competition in a way. But I don't know whether that in isolation will be enough. I think he's just somebody who will want to be winning literal races.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's a he's got that same racing driver fight, even though he realised racing in F3000 that he wasn't good enough. I think it's when Juan Pablo Montoya goes steaming into the first corner at Estoril when he's just coming out of the pit corner, and he's like, there's no way my
this is
brain.
beyond me.
Yeah, he actually really had that proper penny drop moment of I can't do that. So I'm going to channel my competitive energies in a different way. You still have the competitive energies. That's the same regardless. He's as competitive as a Montoya was, as a Raikkonen, whoever, but he's got to find the right outlet for that. So yeah, I think he will want to be doing something that's making a tangible difference to wherever he ends up. Even if it is in a more step back, newy 2014 to 18 style Red Bull, I'm actually on the beach a lot, but I'll do some bits and bobs. He's still going to be wanting to be involved in the competition and seeing results, because that's the ultimate motivation, isn't it?
I think you can get a sense of competition from doing lots of different things, though. So not just my MotoGP idea, but taking that sport and globalizing it and making it not so much something that's huge in Spain and Italy and a bit of France at the moment, and actually turning it into a powerhouse and chasing after bigger sports like F1 for TV ratings and deals and that sort of thing. That's a type of competition in itself, and there'll be a huge sense of achievement if you are able to generate some growth in something like that. I don't mean specifically just that, but there are lots of ways you can satisfy competitive urges without having to wait for, as you said, Ed, one of 10 or 11 jobs to come up on the F1 grid.
That's very true, and that's why it's going to take, I think, time before we see what the next chapter is, and even if there is one in a motorsport competition context. But be surprised if there isn't something, but let's give it a little bit of time and we will probably get some idea of where he's going. Well, we're going to finish off the podcast with some listener questions from the Race Members Club. If you're interested in the Race Members Club, loads and loads of extra bonus content there, podcasts, videos, a thriving community, enormous amount going on there. I can barely keep track of it, but every day there's some new bit of content, some of which doesn't include me, which is always concerning.
Really?
But actually some really good stuff. Actually, I like the stuff that doesn't include me because I just enjoy it more. Don't like watching myself. But anyway.
Very modest.
Exactly. But loads going on. So, yeah, have a look on Patreon and search for The Race if you want to find out more about that. Now, Glenn, we always like to throw some questions that have a little bit of a bring back V10s edge at you, and this one's one of those. And it kind of chimes with the Race Members Club, because we've been talking a little bit about a driver who's mentioned this first question, Alain Prost, recently in our 93 Revisited series. It's not about 93, but Nascimento says, will Max Verstappen steal the championship from Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri a la Alain Prost in 1986?
Yeah, obviously not quite V10 era. It predates our era, but we have done a 1986 episode in the past, and as you said, we have spent 2025 talking about a lot of Alain Prost related things in 1993 and the Prost documentary that came out on the BBC in the UK. And so we've had a lot of Alain Prost conversations, so let's have another one now.
You can never have too much Alain Prost.
Well, I mean, we're trying. I think we're pushing up against the limit, but
yeah,
it's
93 does put you in that territory. As good as the documentary is, yeah, I think 93 it's overly Prost. The 86 question, I see the logic and I like it. I think that were Verstappen to steal this championship, I don't think he'll go about it in the same way Prost did. I think Max Verstappen will be a lot more spectacular in stealing a championship from two warring teammates. Well, they're not warring, but two teammates who are fighting in another team, and then you swoop in as kind of the outsider. So yeah, I don't think Max is about to try and Prost his way to this championship. And you guys obviously had a huge debate on the last podcast about if Max is actually back in title contention. Even if he's not, I think he's going to be an excellent spoiler in the championship fight between the McLaren drivers. He's going to make the lives of Piastri and Norris a lot more difficult on a very regular basis. Hopefully, I say that hopefully as a neutral, because it'll be a lot more fun watching Max Verstappen interfere with how McLaren's trying to run these races than it is if McLaren get to manage these races and constantly say things like papaya rules, which just makes you want to be sick. So if he can get in there
And even if he can't catch them, it's going to be very hard catching two drivers from that far back. I mean, if you get into a head-to-head with one guy, you can maybe just start chipping away at him. But even if he makes inroads on one of them when they have a bad weekend, there's a big chance that the other guy is scoring big points as well. But I just think every time I see a qualifying session where he gets right up there and he's right amongst it, I think this is great because this means the Sunday is not going to play out in a straightforward way as McLaren would like.
Note Samarth that Glenn used the word spoiler, not disruptor, which got Samarth in a lot of trouble in our last debate about this. I think the biggest problem with the comparison is the warring teammates you mentioned. Even if Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris want to become warring teammates like Nelson Piquet and Nigel Mansell were because they didn't get on, they're not allowed to. The so-called papaya rules, diktats, culture of racing at McLaren precludes it. So I think the inherent niceness of that, or the fact they have to hold themselves back to put the team interests first, just means you won't get one of them just losing their mind at a certain race because the other one's winding them up too much, or the mistakes are going to become more from an internal place, I think. And that combined with what you said about Max having to chase them both down because they're so incredibly evenly matched, that it does make it a tall order. But I'm still choosing to believe in the title fight because I just think it will make the last part of this season much more exciting.
I think Max has already injected fresh life into this championship fight just by getting involved at the front. And more of that, please, because it will make it a lot more exciting. On the Mansell and Piquet comparison, I think even if Norris and Piastri were allowed to fall out, I don't think they are the same sort of characters as those two drivers. So I don't think we'd see a repeat of 86 on that side either.
Next question is going to go at you, Ben, from Jake M, who says, despite having the longest straights in F1, low drag circuits like Baku and Monza don't yield much overtaking and produce lots of DRS trains. Should the FIA consider mandating minimum front/rear wing angle for teams across the season, just as Pirelli mandates tyre pressures, or teams are forced to lock in their gear ratios for the entire season? Could this boost overtaking at these circuits? We should note the gear ratios are locked in now anyway, but the rest of it, all up for grabs.
Do they still have the joker for the gear ratios, or is that gone now?
No, I think they'll get that probably one off next year for the new rules. But yeah, you choose
till they figure it out, and then they'll lock that away. I mean, I really hope that they don't. I'm sure if you did mandate these wing angles, you could increase the overtaking, but who wants that? That's spec series stuff, isn't it? It's already, I think, too controlled. Nobody likes the prescripted Pirelli tyre pressures except Pirelli. It's all
Do they
done.
still prescribe the weight distribution as well?
Yeah, there's a weight distribution.
I don't understand
which
that.
originally came in 2011 as a way.
Yeah, why is it still hit?
Exactly. It was a one-off, and it was presented as this is to stop anyone lucking in with weight distribution characteristics for the switch to Pirelli controlled tyres, and then it just stayed forever. And I get why it's there with controlled tyres, but yeah,
get rid of it.
dumb.
There's too much of this stuff, and it's true that especially as now everyone's converged under the regulations. Fred Vasseur was talking about this after Baku, that weirdly you'd think with races like Monza and particularly Baku with the massive straight that overtaking would automatically be easier. And it's not, because the rear wings are smaller, so the DRS effect is less. Okay, but I take that just because I'd rather the competition was close and unpredictable than the overtaking easier. We've seen in the races where the degradation is high, that's another element. At Baku, there was low deg. It's been a problem throughout this season, really. And Pirelli, whatever they do, they can't engineer those two-stop races without doing what they did at Monaco, which is basically forcing everyone to do two stops, and that creates other problems. When you do get that degradation, the overtaking is artificial still, because you've just got these massive grip deltas between one car and the next. I don't like that. So I'm not pro engineering the cars just to make overtaking more, more prevalent. It's a more complicated picture than that. And for me, it's much more about how close can you make the field, how competitive can you make the field, and how likely or unlikely then can you make it that if someone slips up, that the difference between them being on pole and being 10th is a higher order of magnitude than if you mess up and you only end up second or third because you've got a massive performance advantage.
I think we know doing anything aero-wise to try and make it easier to pass or easier to follow, it's very, very difficult. And you can have some effect, but you're still only kind of fiddling around the edges of the problem. These are aero cars, and that's always going to happen. You can't just create a car that just eliminates the problem or massively cuts it.
The drivers would hate high higher drag wings being added for the fast tracks as well, because they'd feel like sitting ducks. It would be all the worst parts of DRS. When in the past, when DRS zones have been miscalculated and they're way too long, it would be like that all the time. And the drivers would go, well, this is ridiculous because I'm just sat here with a massive rear wing on that doesn't suit this track just so somebody can breeze past me down to turn 1 at Baku.
We're going to get that anyway next year, aren't we, with these, manual overrides and cars running out of energy on the long straights. Like Baku's going to be very interesting, and I bet they're going to feel like they've got a massive sail on the back of the car when they run out of deployment and then the other car just goes zooming past. So I think people are going to get their wish next year, and I'm not sure we're going to enjoy it.
The next question I'll take comes from Skmods, who says, what's happened to Nico Hulkenberg since Silverstone? Has he dropped away, or have Sauber just stopped development to focus entirely on 2026? Yeah, obviously he hasn't been quite as prevalent as he was at Silverstone, where he got the third place. He's had quite a few tricky qualifying sessions that haven't quite gone as well. It's so tight now, really, really tight. And if you leave a little bit on the table in qualifying, you tend to end up going out in Q1. So Bortoleto has been getting the better in qualifying. The Sauber's still pretty good, but the Sauber's not as good as it appeared for a period. But it's now a good midfield car, but still in a sort of good midfield car rather than a great midfield car. You still need to execute really, really well. Qualifying has been a problem for Hulkenberg, but he's still been quick, particularly in races. So I don't think it's been a particular slump. He's had some good drives from lower grid positions, but he's a little bit on the wrong side of the battle with Bortoleto, though. That is what I will say, which...
That's what I was going to say. I feel like he's getting maybe a little bit, the beginnings of found out by Bortoleto. Like you've been raving about Bortoleto from earlier in the season. I was a little bit of a slow adopter of the pro Bortoleto position, but I've been getting more and more impressed. This kind of young rookie comes in, has given Hulkenberg the hurry up, and I just wonder if we're seeing that tilt where as Bortoleto gets more
building
comfortable,
up nicely, isn't it?
Yeah, Hulkenberg's trying to reach a bit more, and then he's running into trouble making mistakes. I think Baku's a slightly complicated one because of how windy it was and how wind sensitive, particularly the Sauber is. But nevertheless, Bortoleto managed it better, managed to get through to Q2. Hulkenberg didn't. And I just feel like he's getting in the beginnings of a drubbing. It's almost like we were talking about Alonso and the fact he's got his teammate kind of under lock, and so he doesn't get found out in the same way. I wonder if that's Hulkenberg's problem. He's just coming up against a younger, faster, better teammate that's exposing him a little bit now.
And it also depends where you see Hulkenberg as shaking out. He's a very good driver, but he's not one of the best drivers on the grid all round. He will have
good
ups and
benchmark
downs.
For a rookie, actually,
Exactly.
as in the sort of driver that it should be attainable to get the better of eventually.
Exactly, yeah. So that's why I don't think he's kind of dropped away massively, but Bortoleto's consistency has improved, and yeah, it's just so condensed. It's not to do with Sauber focusing on 26. Everyone pretty much is focused on 26, and the Sauber is a car that on its day can be in Q3 and can be in the top 10, but if you just slightly underachieve in qualifying or slightly struggle as they did with wind in Baku, then you're going to be nowhere. And in Baku, both cars ended up basically stuck in trains because they couldn't qualify that well. The race pace actually could have been okay, but they were just never really able to use it. Question now for you, Glenn, from Nathan Schwartz, who says, are we actually watching Zach Brown's McLaren go one better than during the 99 season and waste such a massive championship opportunity?
Well, that is a V10 era question. I guess we should add a little bit of context here. Obviously, McLaren made very hard work of winning the championship in 99 to the point they didn't win the Constructors' Championship. Quite a few errors on the driving side. Mick Häkkinen threw it off the road a couple of times. David Coulthard drove into Mick Häkkinen a couple of times. And then, weird shambolic moments in pit stops and car failures and that sort of thing. So they made hard work of it with the best car. I don't think we're anywhere near seeing a repeat of that this year. I think there's been, and I've noticed it in the tone of questions we've had on the podcast for the last 3 episodes now since Baku, that I think there's been an overreaction to a really bad weekend in Baku, but it's one weekend. I think that maybe the fact that it came off the back of Monza, where Verstappen quite comfortably beat them, and then McLaren were in focus in Monza because of the position swap thing. But to use those 2 races to create an impression that McLaren are somehow throwing away this championship. We've had lots of discussions about how we don't really think Verstappen's probably in this championship, but we just hope he can make their lives difficult. I don't think there's any comparison. McLaren did a much worse job in 99, as did their drivers, than they are doing at this point. And if Max got back into it, he's Max Verstappen who's got back into it. It's not quite the same as letting Eddie Irvine almost win a championship.
Absolutely, yeah, that would be a disappointing scenario for them. So, that way, right, let's move on now to a question for you, Ben, from David Teague, who says, with the job James Vowles and Williams are doing this year, does that make the Carlos Sainz move look better? I know there was some grumbling last year that maybe he was not the right guy, but the turnaround this year and the first podium on merit in a while for Williams, a good indicator of continued improvement for the next several years?
Look better in terms of him picking the right team, or look better in terms of them picking him? I'm not sure I quite
I presume it means in terms of him picking the right team, and that he might not have been the driver they need at this stage. I don't think there's too much criticism of Williams signing him.
No, I think it was
certainly not from
good signing for them.
The doubts were, should he have done the Audi thing? And I would say pre-Baku, that when you guys were talking about Sainz before Baku, it was, look at Sauber coming back up the track. Maybe he picked the wrong team. It's amazing. Again, to come back to what I said before, one race can completely change a narrative.
Yeah, I think he's certainly not made a bad move. If you say his realistic options were Audi, Sauber, Williams, which he took, or Alpine, I think it's fair to say, even though Pierre Gasly's clinging to the hope of next year, we talked on the last podcast about the doom cycle Renault's team has been in for a long time and will really struggle to get out of without proper sustained investment. Steering clear of that, I think, was a good move. He's picked the right Mercedes customer team to go for. And at the moment, I'd still say it looks like a better bet than Audi Sauber, even though Sauber have been improving as a race team and in their execution on the chassis side. We've been hearing worrying noises out of Audi about where they are with their engine project. So I think he would potentially take a step back, even if he was doing slightly more than, say, Nico Hulkenberg might be doing or Gabriel Bortoletto might be doing with the current car. So Williams, I think, looks like a good fit. I think it's important that Sainz got that result because the underlying pace was there. I was surprised, actually, that at Baku, it put him ahead in the qualifying head-to-head with Albon. It's not felt like that. It's felt like Albon's kind of had his measure for most of the season, but actually in terms of the raw pace, Sainz is right there where you'd expect. He just hasn't been able to convert. Sometimes it's been bad luck. Sometimes it's been bad execution. This time he nailed it. And I still maintain that's probably one of the best lineups overall in terms of balance on the grid. So for Williams, it's a no-brainer. Like they seem to get on well. They haven't gone to war yet, like former Williams teammates have. So I think
Albon was down at the podium, wasn't he?
Well, there you go. See, so legitimately matey, or is it maybe confected in this world of everyone being friends in F1 now? I don't know, but they seem to get on fine. The team harmony seems to be good. James Vowles has been a very convincing team principal there. So I still feel like Sainz should have been signed by Red Bull. I think we'd all agree that was a missed opportunity considering the nightmare they're still having in terms of finding a good fit alongside Max Verstappen. I think Sainz would have been the calibre of driver, like Albon too, actually now, this version of him, who could make that second seat work. But outside of that, I think he's in a good place. And Williams being one of those teams that's thrown more of its focus to 26 earlier, maybe that will pay off. I'm not sure they'll be championship favourites, but maybe more podiums, maybe a win next year. That would be further vindication, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and it's still going to be a few years, I think, before Williams is at the top of this development curve. Should we say they've done a lot. They've still got a lot more to do. 26 is a bit early to expect a great leap forward and fighting for championships, etc. But it does show.
Another step, won't it? I think Vowles is saying more like 28, isn't he?
Yeah,
28, 29 is going to be the version of the team that he wants it to be. Yeah. But I think his vision is very convincing, and I feel like Sainz has really bought into that. And Sainz is not, he's a smart guy. So I think the fact that Vowles has been able to persuade him speaks a lot to the strength of James Vowles as a team boss.
Yeah, and the fact that I think Sainz was quite sensible in the approach he took. He tried to look dispassionately at it, not just see the kind of excitement about the name above the door at Sauber of Audi that's it's going to be there next year. It would be easy to be drawn into that, but actually backing your own judgment and going to something that convinced you, that speaks well, I think, for for his judgment. Right, the final question from Gavin Cameron. I'll take this one. Do you think Hamilton feels like an outsider at Ferrari? He uses a lot of them language rather than us. It's particularly apparent when things are going poorly, i.e. after qualifying. He's never going to feel as integrated not in the short term anyway. He's not going to feel as integrated as he was at Mercedes because he'd been there in F1 terms forever, hadn't he? So,
has he driven into the Mercedes pit box yet? That's normally what a driver does when they've been at one team for ages.
Yeah, well, he did it when he left McLaren, didn't he, to go to Mercedes?
Yeah, it's one of those fun tricks that drivers often do. But I think, he's into it. He won't feel fully comfortable there yet, as you would anyone in a normal walk of life. If you work somewhere for 10, 12 years and then you move somewhere else to a rival, it'll probably take you quite a while to feel completely integrated. But I think you feel like an outsider. I'm sure he's very conscious of the fact he still needs to kind of pay back the team's faith with performance because he's not delivering at the level he wants to. I think you've got to be really careful with Hamilton of drawing too much from those post-session interviews. I've said before, he's pretty bad in those. Take him away, let him digest it, do the debrief, come back. He's brilliant when Mercedes used to do those sessions a chunk after. I actually think that was not only much more interesting for those listening, it was much better for Hamilton because it allowed him to explain what was going on much better. It allowed him to not come across badly, which he does sometimes, which is understandable because they've just got out of a car or whatever, and of course he's going to be disappointed and the words may not be chosen precisely.
It's a whirlwind down there where you have to answer the same questions so many times, and if you're a bit down when you get there, you'll just be begging for it to end. Whereas if you do that considered, say, Saturday night session that they used to do, you're talking to everybody at once. You may be there for 20 minutes or something, but you don't really have to answer the same question more than once. And I'm sure mentally that's better for a driver as well. And I can understand how they go stir crazy in that pen, answering the same questions over and over again when they don't want to be there in the first place.
Going back to the they and we element of the question, I think there's a certain aspect of it just being time. He's not going to feel yet like he's properly part of Ferrari, as not just for the fact that he's new, but the time it takes to feel each other out. I think he's still going through that process of working out what bits he can bring from his time at Mercedes that actually apply and mould it more to the way he wants. This document that was referenced, I think, pre-summer break that he'd written to Ferrari's bosses saying, I want this for 26, or we should do this, that and the other. That will be taken on board, but it won't carry the sway automatically that it would have done when he was at Mercedes and integrated for year after year after year and basically one of the leaders of the team, not just in terms of being in the cockpit, but just more generally. And at the same time, they're trying to say, well, yeah, we'll as a team adjust around you, but up to a point, because we've got certain things that we believe in that we're going to do, and he's going to have to, and I think he started to do this even from his in-weekend way of working, try to adapt himself a little bit more, break some of those ingrained habits, not try to drive the car like the one he knew before or make it into the car that he drove before. That's a process of trial and error, I think. And I imagine he's almost speaking in those moments, almost emotionally, I don't feel as connected to the team yet just because I haven't developed that same bond and that same trust with everybody that I've just given up at Mercedes.
Let's come back to the phraseology of the question, saying, does he feel like an outsider? I don't think he feels that, but he probably doesn't feel like a fully insider, if you see what
exactly.
I mean.
Yeah.
So he's still going through a process of cohering. It's not that he's on the outside, but he's not kind of fully settled in. And
he's not what he was, is he?
Yeah.
And he's also not what he thinks he can be. Yeah. So he's kind of stuck in that no man's land between the two.
Yeah, and it will take time. And if progress keeps happening and there's a good step next year, then it could get to the point where he feels like that. It may get to the point where he never feels totally at one with Ferrari. That's very, very possible. But it takes so long, I think, to integrate with a team. And we just talked about Carlos Sainz and how well he's integrated with Williams. It's a different challenge when you're going into a team like Williams as a driver like Carlos Sainz to going into a team like Ferrari as anyone, let alone Lewis Hamilton, a 7 times world champion. So, yeah, it's something that will take time. But, yeah, I'd always be careful about reading too much into what Hamilton says straight out the car, because sometimes he comes across well, sometimes he does come across fairly poorly. And it's not through design, or I think it just reflects the fact he's answering questions when he hasn't really had the time to think about it, get his head around what's been going on, and really get on top of what he thinks. Because I'm convinced he's a driver who you could give him like the luckiest pole position in the world or luckiest win in the world in a race. He would have been last, but for loads of things happening, and he'll be delighted. Or he could have a brilliant performance and just not come together, and he'd feel in the moment like he'd perform better when the result was good.
I don't know, because I think Baku wasn't like that. I would agree with you normally, but in Baku, they absolutely botched qualifying. The tyres were wrong for each driver compared to what they felt was best. They didn't deliver on the promise they showed on Friday. And yet Hamilton, who you would expect to be like, I was out in Q2, and only a few races before he was declaring himself useless, having missed Q3, he was actually going, I'm feeling really good. It's like there's been a switch recently, and it must be to do with this way of working in the processes, where he's feeling like the underlying comfort and performance he's able to access from the car is making him happy. So therefore he's able, I think, to better process some of those disappointments than he was before. And that's part of the integration process with the new team, isn't it? It's not every single result is affecting him in the same way, because he's, I think, starting to realise he can compartmentalise more of the performance. Whereas when he wasn't necessarily trusting all the technical aspects were right, he was ingesting it more into himself. And when you see a driver like Leclerc doing so much more with the car at certain points, that's going to really hurt a driver like Lewis. I give him a lot of credit for going into the lion's den in that way, because he's finding out something that we're not finding out about Fernando Alonso. And also he's got this problem of trying to not take the team off Leclerc exactly, but counter that weight of how long Leclerc's been there, not just as an F1 driver, but even before, how well he knows the team. Lewis, when he joined Mercedes, Rosberg had been there for the build-up 3 seasons by that point. Hamilton still had that 1 year of adjustment in 13 where he didn't feel quite right with it, and then 14 he built up, managed to win the championship, and then it snowballed after that. But Leclerc's been at Ferrari a lot longer than Rosberg had been at Mercedes, plus he's got the extra cultural challenge of it being not a British team and stuff Fred Vasseur's talked about. So it's a big challenge, as well as the teammate being, I think, a bigger challenge to overcome than Rosberg was back then.
I think actually you made a good point there about Baku and the difference in tone. That probably was something I was doing a bit too general and sweeping with that. So I'm pleased you brought that up. That perhaps is a sign that just the progress is happening. And actually, if you look at the past few events, there's kind of gently decent performance progress coming from Hamilton, I think.
It's less up and down. The graph is definitely a bit more stable, I think, and he's clinging to that at the moment.
Yeah, and he'll have all eyes basically on 2026 and using the end of the season just to continue to make progress. So everything's there for a Mercedes 2014 style 2026 that he will be dreaming of. Thank you to everybody who sent in questions. Thanks to Glenn and to Ben as well for your excellent answers. Thanks, as always, we've got plenty more to talk about, so stay with us for everything you need to know from the world of Formula One.